Hello, everyone. It is just after 6:30 this evening, so we're just going to ask if everyone can make their way to their seats as we get ready to get started, and that will be in just a couple of minutes. Okay, me again. Good evening, Nashville. I know we had some wine out there. Let's try it again. Good evening, Nashville. Hey there. Hey there. Thank you so much for being here. We want to welcome you tonight to the Nashville Mayoral Forum for Arts and Entertainment. My name is Lydia Fielder. I am an anchor and reporter with WSMV4 here in Nashville. And I just want to say it is a pleasure to be here representing WSMV. I'm also going to be learning right along with you what a great experience it is for us to be here in this space, to be able to learn and be on the forefront of these important conversations tonight and this important race. And we really wouldn't be here without some very generous people and partners tonight. So we want to go ahead and recognize and thank our sponsors. I'll get through the list of around 7 and then we'll have applause. We want to mention the Hutton Hotel, Mojo Marketing, Martin Development, Urban Housing Solutions, the Urban League Young Professionals of Middle Tennessee, the Change Agency, and the BAM Group. Thanks to them. We also want to give a very special thank you to our marvelous social media partners. That is Love Noise and MBK Nashville. Round of applause. There we go. Okay, so to start things off, we want to introduce to you a very special gentleman this evening. He is the man who is the president and CEO of this beautiful space that you're sitting in. So please welcome to the stage, from the National Museum of African American Music, Henry Hicks.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It is a real good evening. Thank you so much. Good evening. We're going to have some good dialogue, some good discourse here tonight, but we're going to have some fun also. You know, I am really, really delighted to welcome you all here tonight to the National Museum of African American Music, our museum, but more importantly, it's your museum. And so I want you to take advantage of that, and you can give that a round of applause. You know, we have really needed this. You know, we really look at this place as a center for civic discourse and dialogue, where we can talk about the things that matter in our city and matter in our community, the things we care about, the things that we're concerned about, the things that we can celebrate that are going well, the things that we want to see if we can do a little bit more to support. And I think certainly the arts and entertainment is one of those things, don't you? I wasn't really enthusiastic. Y'all did better earlier. Don't y'all think supporting arts and entertainment are really important? So I really want to thank Nashville Music Equality, the Arts and Business Council, as well as the Nashville Arts Coalition for putting this on for all of us, and we're pleased to be the host location. I really also want to take a moment to acknowledge my colleagues, the leaders of the Metro Arts Coalition, Cheekwood, TPAC, the Frisk Country Music Hall of Fame, and the Symphony are all here. So let's give it up for them and acknowledge that they are here to make their point of view on this felt. So without further ado, once again, really want to welcome you all here. Want to say thank you for being here, and let's make it a point to listen carefully and make a difference in our city. Thank you.
What a leader in this city, Mr. Hicks. Thank you so much. And now we want to go to the remarkable group that has been working to make this whole event happen for our community. They're sitting on the front row here. So allow me to introduce, with a wave, Brian Sexton, the Community Engagement Chair of Nashville Music Equality. To his right, we have Jamie Kent, the President of the Brand Ambassador Media Group. And then the dynamic duo, you might have seen them running around all afternoon. They were very prepared. They were just making last-minute changes. That is Lucia Folk and Lisa Chater, co-founders of the Change Agency. And last but not least, we have Jill McMillan-Palm, the Executive Director of the Arts and Business Council of Greater Nashville. While you're here, Jill, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Let's do it. Like Lydia said, my name is Jill McMillan-Palm, and I am the Executive Director of the Arts and Business Council of Greater Nashville. And as an independent nonprofit here in the city, we work to provide the resources, education, and opportunities that artists, arts organizations, and creative businesses need to survive and thrive in their creative endeavors. And so among many of the programs and services that we offer, one of those things that we do is the biannual Creative Economy Survey, which helps us understand the trends in our creative community, what's coming next, and how we can anticipate those needs for those we serve. In 2021, the Creative Economy Survey revealed that 25% of Nashville artists were considering leaving Nashville in the next 2 to 3 years for a myriad of reasons, including a rising cost of living, lack of accessible artistic infrastructure, and a perceived lack of support at both the city and state levels. I will put a plug in here that the 2023 Creative Economy Survey is currently live on our website at abcnashville.org if you have not taken it yet. Everyone is invited to take that survey, and we look forward to sharing those results later in the summer with everyone, and we hope that number has come down a little bit. But it's clear as the cost of living soar and working class artists are still dealing with the remnants of the pandemic, that the creative culture that's been our calling card here in the city is in a crisis. So tonight, it's very easy for civic leaders to say that they support the arts and they love the arts and we love going to all of our incredible facilities here in the city. But what we're here tonight to do is to challenge our candidates to share their specific solutions on what they think and how they intend to intentionally invest in our creative ecosystem. With that in mind, we believe it's paramount that every candidate truly understands the importance of this issue and that they know how important our creative class is. So Nashville's Music City brand might just depend on it, and we hope they understand that. So without further ado, we're really excited to get this conversation started, and I will turn it back to you, Lydia. Thanks.
I knew when she walked out in the pink pantsuit, she was a woman of power. All right, so this conversation, this is how it's going to work. This is how we planned the evening. We will kick things off with the same question for each of our candidates. So then we're going to move to asking questions in groups of 2 to 3 candidates at a time. And actually before tonight, we asked each of the candidates about Nashville's creative community, which is why we're all here, right? And they all gave written answers. We've actually customized questions based on those answers, so you are really getting a unique experience here that you're not going to see at another forum. So to end this forum, each candidate is going to have one final question. If I'm doing the math right, which I'm a journalist, so everyone is going to have the opportunity, though, to answer 4 questions in total. I do also want to draw your attention to your program. If you have one of those, there should be a QR code on the back of that program. Scanning that code, you'll be able to access candidate bios and a lot more information on the organizations that I've mentioned tonight that are supporting tonight's forum. All right, so now we're going to get started. Who is ready? It is my pleasure to introduce you to tonight's moderators and leading ladies. First up, we have Gina Miller. She is the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Monarch Music Group. And Wilna Taylor. She is the Assistant Director of the Curb Center for Art, Enterprise, and Public Policy at Vanderbilt University. And with that, I'll turn it over to them.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone, and welcome once more. My name is Wilna Julmis Taylor, and it is my pleasure to be here with you tonight for this most worthy and important conversation. I guess once they introduce the candidates, we'll begin our conversation.
All right. All right, here we go. Hey, y'all. Let's do it. All right. First, we have Fran Bush, Natisha Brooks, Heidi Campbell, Jim Gendrich, Sharon Hurt, Freddie O'Connell, Alice Rowe, Matt Wilshire, and Jeff Yarbrough. Welcome them, please. Good evening.
Good evening. Yes, get comfortable. I think the pillows are to help you feel comfortable and relaxed. But if it's not helping, we can, do you want us to pass it along? Okay, you're gonna hold it. So thank you once more for being here tonight to engage us in this conversation. To get this going, I'm going to ask the first question, and we're going to go down the line with your response, and you have 1 minute. Okay? So the first question presented says, what role does the arts, culture, and creativity play specifically in your life? So again, I'll say it. What role do the arts, culture, and creativity specifically play in your life?
Okay, so all of that she just said, I didn't want to get tongue twisted on this, but let me just tell you, in my life, I had a music kid. I have 5 sons, and my last son, he decided he wanted to play the French horn. Now, a lot of us in here know the French horn is pretty hard to play, right? And he was so interested in his French horn, and real quickly, he, reading notes, music notes is really difficult, right? But it really, really helped him as far as his literacy, and that was really big for our family. And he was one of those kids that just really was not liking school as much. He's a very smart kid, but kind of lazy. So to me, it hit home for me that this kid wanted to play the French horn and did very well at it. So that's my experience.
Thank you. And we'll just keep going down the line, yes.
Natisha Brooks. I'll sing unto the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things and always will do marvelous things for Nashville. Every time I cross the Davidson County line, Music City, Metropolitan, Davidson County, home of the Grand Ole Opry, it gives me chills. And it reminds me that we are the it city for music. From when I cross into Memphis, cross into Williamson County, cross into Davidson County, I always have this question that I ask my students or former students. I'm a retired educator. Would you rather watch movies or listen to music? And it's not a trick question, but for me, it's music. Music is healing, therapy to the soul, and as long as I can listen to the greatest voice of all time, Whitney Houston, and a little bit of rock and roll, Tina Turner, we're all good.
My name's Heidi Campbell. I never planned to get involved in politics. I was going to be a rock star. I had an awesome band, so cliche, because I grew up in Nashville, right? And we played all over the eastern U.S. and opened for Hootie and the Blowfish and the Dave Matthews Band and Lilith Fair. I'm dating myself here. We never made any money. And so I started licensing music to film and television, had a licensing company, and did that for my friends who had written amazing songs. And so my mom was also an actress growing up, and my sister's an actress, and the arts are really important to me. I think that a lot of us think of the arts as a value add, and I do not think of the arts that way. I think of it as a core value. We have data that shows us very clearly that it's an important connection with math, science, and just culturally, it is our lifeblood, especially here in Nashville. So the arts are very, very important to me.
I'm Jim Gingrich. I We went through, I moved a company here that's just down the block called Alliance Bernstein. And as you might imagine, we went through a process of trying to decide where we were to put the company. What I never told anybody involved in that process is that some of my favorite artists are people like Tyler Childers and Sturgill Simpson and Jason Isbell. I only told them after we had made the decision, when I made the tie-breaking vote about which city we were going to go to. This is such a unique city. I think the other thing I'd just say is if you walked around my apartment every day I get up, I'm so blessed because art is such an important part of my life, both in terms of contemporary art, blown glass, things of that sort that just make me happy every day. I walk into my apartment after a long day at work or when I get home at night and go to bed. Thank you.
I'm Sharon Hurt, and I am a rock star. You can tell by the clothes that I wear. Music is everything to me, has always been, no matter what is going on in my life, in our lives, when we're down low, even when we had to travel across the oceans wide and deep, we sang from our souls. As we continue and we jump for joy. And as speaking of jump, it's a universal language because I served as CEO of Jump and created a Jefferson Street United Merchants Partnership Jazz and Blues Festival, going on 23 years, uniting people because music is a universal language.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Freddie O'Connell, and I have the privilege of representing where we're sitting in the world's and Nashville's National Museum of African American Music. I hope Henry told you if this is your first visit, don't let it be your last. This is a great place to bring the entire family. We brought our children and my parents here. My dad was a songwriter, and that's how I think it started for me. My parents have an incredible vinyl collection, and that led to a lifelong interest in music. I learned how to play piano at the W.O. Smith School of Music when it was still on Edge Hill Avenue, and then went on to get interested in art, and I became an AP Art and Art History student. Went on to meet my life partner, Whitney Boone, in a music class in college, and she was a violist, and we still have an incredible music tradition in our house. Our daughters are now incredible artists, and one of the reasons this is so important to me is my older daughter is in West End Middle School, loves art, and they don't have an art teacher, and we're going to work on that.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Alice Rowley. I am a Nashville native, but I am not a musician. I changed that as soon as I could by marrying my better half, who spent 10 years at the Manhattan School of Music. And after he finished 20 years in the Army, when we moved back here, he took the GI Bill and went and got a film degree at Watkins. And being on the front row of watching how the arts helps people who have undergone all kinds of different trauma, whether or not it's being soldiers in the Army or otherwise, our Creative Vets program, the arts and music, I think, bring people together and heal in a way that nothing else does and creates community. I was fortunate to spend 4 years with Quaver Music, and I know that we've got a lot of elementary music educators watching tonight, and advocating both nationally and at the state level for including arts between the bells for all of our kids. When we push all those programs after school, we miss our kids and the value that arts education brings to their lives.
Good evening.
Good evening.
There we go. I thought I was in Nashville. My name is Matt Wilshire, and it's an honor to be with you here tonight. And thank you to the museum for putting this on, and thank you all for caring enough about your city and the arts in it to be here with us this evening. I'm excited to be here with you and talk about this really important topic. For me, arts impacts me both directly. It adds richness to my life. I'm a huge fan of live music and go to concerts frequently. But most importantly, I get to see it through my children. So my wife Chrissy and I have 6 kids between us. Please pray for us. 5 teenagers and a 5-year-old who will start in public schools in August. But we've seen how important music education is in the schools, and it's absolutely vital that we invest in that. But I've seen the richness of their lives and the way each of our children expresses themselves through art. It is vital that every child has that same investment and the same opportunity to express themselves through art and music and culture.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Yarbrough, and I want to thank everyone for being here tonight to talk about the future of the arts in our city. For me, growing up in Dyersburg, Tennessee, a small town about 180 miles west of here, my earliest memory of the arts is my mom putting my brother and me in our church clothes and driving us to the city to go see musical theater, of all things. But it weirdly started a love affair that led to me singing in choir, joining the gospel choir in college, where I sang enthusiastically, if not well. and you know, now singing Matilda for lyrics with my daughter and taking my son to his first concert last summer. Music is this thing that brings us together and makes us think broader about the world. And I think we in Nashville get that there is something, a connection that is hard to explain logically, but easy to feel between achievement in the arts and achievement in our public life, to quote President Kennedy.
All right.
Thank you.
I'm going to direct my question to Jim and Sharon. And Fran, I'm going to have you, if you would, follow up with your position. So Jim and Sharon, both of you indicated in your questionnaire that the creative community is the soul of our city. As mayor, how will your administration support arts and culture in an equitable and responsible way as an economic engine for the city, both downtown and in neighborhoods? Jim, you can start, and then Sharon.
So, thank you for that question. It is a good question. You know, I made reference to the fact that I had the opportunity when we were trying to sort out where we were going to move the company to have conversations with many cities, not just Nashville, about how they thought about the arts. Charlotte, Denver, Austin. And I have to tell you that in Nashville, what we are doing in the arts arena is super important, but we still have work to do relative to how some of these other cities think about the arts community in a strategic way and what that means in terms of economic development. We have such we all know, we have an amazing tourism industry here, an amazing hospitality industry. It needs to be nurtured, but we need to think strategically about what we want that industry to look like in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years. We know that some of these other cities think about it in a way of how do I develop an industry that is going to have broad appeal to the tourism industry. And similarly, how do I create an arts environment that is going to attract people to want to live in that city and attract industry to that city? The fact that we fund our arts industry out of Metro at the grand total of $3 million and have been doing so now for a number of years, which is just a fraction of our budget, $3 billion. And you have many of these other cities funding it at a much higher level, and also with private dollars. And they find ways to bring private dollars into our arts. If we were spending what Charlotte spent, we would be spending, what, 7, 8, 10 times what we spend today. And interestingly enough, many of these cities fund this out of their economic and community development group. because they see it as essential to developing the overall economy and future of that city. So it is not just something that enriches us, but it's also something that enriches us.
Yes.
And we need to think about it that way.
Sharon?
The culture has changed, but the politics have not. We have Fisk University with the Grammy Award-winning Jubilee Singers. The reason why this city is called Music City. Tennessee State University, Grammy Award-winning aristocrat of bands. When you look at the industries here, healthcare, music, education, art plays a part in every piece of it. We must prioritize art because nothing else can survive without it. That's the problem that we have here. When I created the Bridging the Gap mixer on the Shelby Street Bridge, I named it where downtown Nashville meets uptown Jefferson Street, because we need more color and more colorful music downtown. And then we brought them over to Jefferson Street for the Jazz and Blues Festival, because we needed to come together demographically and geographically. And I think that's very, very important, and we miss the opportunity. The Nashville scene said that the Jazz and Blues Festival should be comparable to the Essence Festival in New Orleans. But because the inequity of us getting funds for that, the very first time I went to council, was introduced to Metro Council, I went there to represent the Metro Arts Commission. Thank you, Jonathan, for introducing me to what now is a lifelong profession for me. But it was because of the passion that I had and going there for a grant. We would spend 2 weeks writing a grant. You remember, Lionel, as my board member. 2 weeks for $1,500. 10 years later, I was told by Roger Mosley, rest his soul, that you are established and this should not happen. We must do better. This is the heart and soul of this city, and we should act like it and put the money behind it. Where your treasure is where you put your gold.
All right. Fran? Yeah, Fran, what's your position on this?
So number one, we have to be very, very intentional about our arts and entertainment, right? This is the heart and soul of our city. This is the heart and soul of Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, USA, right? One of the things that I will be very transparent about is our education system, our young people. We need to touch them more. We need to make them more inclusive. Right now we have crime that's amongst our young people, ages 14 to 26 years old. If we invest more into arts and entertainment and pull that talent into our schools a lot more, we would see crime decrease. It would decrease. But because we don't have the extra means to be able to fund every school with instruments, right? Simple instruments, art, teachers. You heard about teachers, right? So we have to be more intentional about our young people. Now, when I say this, we are an aging population, not to say that we're old, but I will tell you that we have to start bringing up our next generation of young people to be able to take over this city, to take over this country and this world. Arts and entertainment is the biggest part of their lives, really. What do they do on their cell phones all day? Music, right? They got their headphones in, right? Or earbuds, right? Because I'm old school. So earbuds, right? That's what they're doing. And instead of us bridging that gap and really bringing to them the arts and entertainment that we should, because you guys are amazing and this is the work that y'all do every single day. And I talked to someone about a nonprofit earlier. We really need to be more intentional about getting our young people more involved so they can stay out of that trouble, right? And that's what we need. We need more of that. Everything that you all said and more. But I do want to say, if we want to really be more intentional in this city about really decreasing crime amongst our young people and giving them more to do when it comes to arts and entertainment, we will see change. We will see big changes. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question I'm sorry.
No, I was saying, can I have another minute?
Oh, can you have another minute? Oh, I'm sorry, we're gonna have to keep moving forward. Maybe afterwards. Good try. So for the next question, I am going to address it to Freddie and to Jeff. Everyone who answered our questionnaire agreed that Nashville is currently facing a crisis in which its creative workforce can no longer afford to sustainably work and live here. Jeff and Freddie, you each gave specific ideas on how to address this crisis. Jeff, you shared how a solution you mentioned is creating a cultural district. Can you describe how you envision this working?
Thank you. So a songwriter moving to Nashville with $1 and a dream should be possible in Nashville in real life, not just the Nashville that's in song lyrics. But increasingly, we know that's not possible. If you have to work 86 hours a week to cover your rent, and you don't have a place to rehearse, or you don't have a place to paint or sculpt, you really can't build the creative life. But I do think that there are solutions that we should be bringing to the table. Now, first, I want to be clear. We've got to invest in affordable housing across the board, which requires so much work and really a citywide effort that is bringing all of our resources to the table. But specifically with regard to the cultural districts idea, I think what we should be doing is trying to build the public-private partnerships where we are working with government land at times, with philanthropic organizations, with our universities and colleges, with other civic institutions, and trying to leverage private dollars and public dollars to create cultural districts where you could have affordable housing partnered with rehearsal space, partnered with creative space. And those should be in numerous places throughout the city. I mean, I think you can see the beginnings of what this looks like if you go to Buchanan Street and see sort of the string of art galleries and studios along that area. We've seen some work that's along this pathway with the Ryman Lofts, but I think we need to be much broader, much more inclusive across the entire county, and also a little bit more ambitious. A similar idea was actually found in New Orleans post-Katrina when Habitat for Humanity partnered with several of the music personalities in that community. I think it was Harry Connick Jr. and Marsalis, to create Musicians Village. So there are single-family residences in a community, coupled with aging artists who are in residencies. And the way that they pay their rent effectively is by teaching music to those young people. That creates community, it creates affordability, and it nurtures creativity as this intergenerational force that brings us together. And that's exactly how we should incorporate the arts and music into everything we do in our city. It's not a problem to take on in a siloed place, but should be part of the way we approach everything we do in the city and how we solve the biggest problems we face, which includes affordable housing.
Thank you, Jeff. So Freddie, I'm going to touch on something you shared specifically regarding establishing a standalone office of housing and building a transit system. Can you give us some more details about how these two initiatives would specifically help create a creative community?
Yeah, I think if you look at every other successful city that has a dynamic creative class, they have all of the elements of quality of life, and that includes transit and safe infrastructure that the creative class wants in a city. Nashville is the last major city that stands without a transit system. That is a huge opportunity to reduce cost of living. As a former chair of our Transit Authority Board, and as someone who worked intensely on plans, including while I was on Metro Council, I'm extraordinarily prepared to make near-term progress on the promise of developing a transit system. We've got a fantastic program of investment already anticipated by WEGO, and we just have failed to deliver on it over the past 5-6 years. So when I'm elected, we will start on that in a way that connects communities via community transit centers. And the best thing we can do is make sure that transit system is connected directly to the housing opportunities like Ryman Lofts, and we should use that successful model. When I was in college in Rhode Island, there was this amazing program of artist lofts, and I was glad to come back and see us start to develop a similar program. We know that between our housing authority and a standalone office of housing, which would be fully empowered with a full metro department head to create long-term policy that could outlast a single mayoral administration, we will do important things like figure out the programs that support artists but also support the art teachers that we need, because we want our teachers to be able to live in the same communities that they're in. We need to make sure that we're developing permanent homes for institutions like the Nashville School of the Arts, and that its faculty, students, and staff can all have access to transit and affordable housing. Those two things go hand in hand, and they are the bedrock for a strong and successful creative class in a city as important as Nashville, on not just the regional, national, but also global scale. We should be setting the reference standard for how we support our arts. If you talk to musicians who come down here to try to play gigs, one of the biggest challenges is parking so that they can access the venues that they're trying to play in. Parking downtown has gotten incredibly expensive, and we need to make sure we've got creative solutions as a city. We've tried a little bit to work on parking specifically for musicians, and it's had limited success, but that's a thing that the city can do to support it. But ultimately, if you have all of those things working together, your transit, your infrastructure, and your creative class, and you're doing it intentionally, everyone thrives.
Thank you.
All right, Heidi and Matt. A 2021 report from the Mayor's Affordable Housing Task Force projects that Nashville needs to add nearly 54,000 units by 2030 to keep up with the demand, or 4,800 units per year. Would you prioritize the development of creative workforce housing as part of that? For example, through an MDHA initiative such as Ryman Lofts?
Yes, of course I would, and that's not a 3-minute answer, but you know, we're in a situation specifically relative to the arts, and I would say let's not ask what the arts can do for us, but what we can do for the arts here in Nashville, because for a long time the arts have been generating a whole lot of the growth and the positive things that happen in this city. And we have artists who are getting priced out, and it's not affordable for them. And so affordable housing is across the board a huge problem, but it's particularly important when we're talking about our bread and butter. And that's the artists that have really generated the tourism industry initially in Nashville, which, you know, Music City was built upon. So I absolutely think that programs like Ryman Lofts are things that we need to pursue. And because the state has passed a law that does not allow us to consider affordable housing as a component of our negotiations, I think that we should look at lease agreements as a workaround. And I also think when corporations like big, huge corporations like Amazon and Oracle move here, we need to ask them to purchase land for the purpose of having affordable housing, because they are also benefiting from our rich arts community, and they also have employees who are going to need to be able to have affordable housing. Absolutely. It's a problem for everybody. And this is all of these issues that we're discussing are interrelated. None of these issues exist in a vacuum. This is all related: transit, affordable housing. We are in a situation where we're in a very high growth city, and we have not given enough love and attention to our arts community, and we need to do that. And I also want to mention that we need a really good first-rate Guthrie level, if you guys are familiar with Minnesota, state-of-the-art theater that hopefully TPAC can move into. And I know that there are conversations about that, but I am really excited about that because sports are great, but for a city our size to have the amazing Frisk Museum, but so tiny, and incredible museums like this, but not nearly as much as we should have for a city our size. We need to support all of those things. And affordable housing is a big component of that, because inevitably, if we can't afford to live here, we're not going to be able to continue to thrive as an artistic community.
So, Matt, before you jump in, can I tack on something? All right, because while at MDHA, you actually worked with Amazon to create 130 homes. So I guess the question, after you asked the original question, just lead us right into how do we get other corporations to follow suit?
You can answer my question, take my question for me. Thank you for that. The original question was, what can we do in the area of affordable housing, and will I support efforts like that? The short answer is, as you said, not only yes, but I've actually already done it. Mm-hmm. So when I worked in the mayor's office of economic and community development, one of the roles that I had was helping to lead the Music City Music Council. Many of you in this room may have been involved with that, but that was bringing together industry participants, executives, leaders, artists, to find out what does the music industry need and how can the city partner with this. Carl Dean created the Music City Music Council, and we grew that over time. And it was, in fact, that initiative that brought forward the Ryman Lofts. Right. It's about talking to the community, listening to the artists, understanding what's needed, and then taking those lessons and putting them into action. I've done it. Mm-hmm. I will continue to do it. And after serving in the mayor's office for 8 years, in a job that I loved very much, we worked closely with the music industry on a variety of initiatives, including recruiting more music jobs here, including Warner Music and others, but then helping to attract other businesses like Alliance Bernstein, who were drawn to our city because of music. I left that job because I saw that affordable housing was the next big issue for our city. And so I worked with the mayor to create the Envision plan, and I moved to MDHA to work to implement that plan. And that means having affordable housing at a variety of price points, deeply affordable HUD subsidized housing for folks who are not earning very much money, but also workforce housing for those artists who are starting to earn a little bit more, and market rate housing for those who are more successful, but doing that in an integrated way so that we aren't suburbanizing poverty and pushing it out. It is having that kind of integrated housing that is absolutely vital to having a rich fabric in our community. So I have experience working on that, but we need to do more. Yeah. And the plan that we launched, unfortunately, was put on the shelf by the new administration, although I should give them credit. They've come back and now invested more a couple of years later. But one of the things that I did was went to Amazon, to Senator Campbell's point, and asked them to invest. And they actually invested $7 million in the redevelopment of public housing in a way that created mixed income housing. And I know that many corporations, when they are invited to have a seat at the table, would love to be more involved. But we haven't asked enough. There hasn't been clear leadership. This and many of the other challenges that our city are facing need decisive leadership. And I believe that with my experience in the public sector, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector, I'm equipped to provide clear, decisive leadership to take on these challenges, starting with affordable housing, but across the spectrum.
Thank you for that. I mean, we're going to celebrate the 130 homes, but we need 4,800. We don't have time to unpack how we get there tonight, but keep that in mind. All right, I'll talk to you next week sometime. Heidi, back to you. You mentioned that using lease instruments to create affordable housing would be something of interest and something that you would work towards. Can you expand a little bit on what that means to you?
Yeah, so I've been talking to a legal team about that, and they've looked into the viability of using leased instruments juxtaposed to entering into just development deals, and it is a way that we could work around the onerous laws that we passed in the state that disallow us from making that a requirement as part of our agreements.
Okay. Good.
So we're going to continue with the topic of space. And this question is going to be directed at Natisha, Alice, and Freddie. So the question is, would you support publicly owned, unoccupied space to be transformed into creative development or presentation space for music and the arts in Nashville? So Alice, you'd mentioned about corporations activating new and unused space. Can you expand on that?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so actually, I was fortunate to serve 2 terms on the board of directors of WPLN and PR. And one of the issues that you mentioned, along with TPAC looking for its new home, was for us at the station trying to help accommodate the growth. And I think Jim brought this up in his remarks, is how do we claim the role of arts and music as integral to the functioning of the economy? And one place I believe that we have such strength in Nashville around this is in placemaking, because there are so many tech companies, right, coming or thinking or looking at Nashville. And one of the biggest challenges to building and growing a community today with hybrid work is creating spaces where our employees want to come, right? So at Quaver, when I started there, we had 55 employees. When I left, we had 140 employees. And one of the challenges, right, is getting people to come into the office and want to be there. So as we look at some of these larger office buildings and spaces that are going up, where we actually know we have a little bit of a challenge in commercial real estate now, in that companies are saying, I don't need that much space. So how do we say for a WPLN or for a TPAC or for your arts group, how do we start to match a space like this where you can convene not only artists after work, but you can convene your employees during work, and seeing that as a value proposition for that building or for that space? When I worked for Governor Haslam in economic development, one of the first things that we did was identify that the Film Commission was living separately. It was living totally separately, and its arms were not being, the economic development strategy was not wrapping its arms around that. We brought it into the Department of Economic and Community Development, and the Film Commission reported to me it actually had its best budget years ever. That's when Nashville, the TV show, was here. And when we went and we said, arts as part of bringing more companies here, looking at not just some of the older aspects of music, like the label aspect, which is a little bit trailing, but starting to say, how do we have more video game scoring done here, right? How do we use the tech, some of the higher tech jobs that also benefit with the creative economy, and how do we wrap those into Nashville? So I see it as an opportunity that we know that a lot of these buildings will not need as much space for typical employees, and how do we start to say, nonprofits, let's own that space, let's create the space and create a culture that's vibrant, that employees want to come to work, and that our creative class gets to also use those spaces at different times.
Thank you. Natisha?
So I took an Uber over here because I didn't want to pay $35 for the parking from Greater Bethel AME Church. We parked our car over there, and we Ubered over here, and our Uber driver happened to be a musician. And by the time he broke it down to me, I was almost in a state of tears. He doesn't live in the county, lives about 2-3 counties out, drives in every day to Uber, hoping to get a spot on a stage. And by the time he gets his band on a stage, the place might have overbooked. So they have to go back to their car, pay for their parking. If they do get the gig, they split $300, and he said they average about $75 a piece. By the time they pay for parking and get leftover pizza, if they get the pizza that they have to pay for, right? They have nothing left. I would like to work with hotels that have unoccupied. There's downtime seasons, right? Not too much anymore in Nashville, but we do have some downtime. And would like to work with hotels, Airbnbs. I actually sat next to someone at Monell's restaurant today that owned an Airbnb, and I said, would you consider housing musicians? And he said, I didn't think about that. I haven't thought about that. As far as office space, as new office buildings go up, there are a lot of office space that goes unoccupied of old buildings. So instead of letting the buildings sit there, I would like to partnership with those leaseors to see if we can get artists to have free, and I did say free rental space, because listen to what I just said. By the time some of these artists break their money down, they make nothing, absolutely nothing. And so one of the formulas that I have as an educator, nothing from nothing leaves nothing. And that's not right for our artists, the music city, the it city. So I'd like to partnership with hotels, office space that's not being occupied, and for our artists to be able to have a chance. One of my favorite artist group is Journey, Faithfully, so that they have a chance to make it in our city. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Freddie, I'm going to continue on this theme and ask you about Office of Opportunity and unused metro space. How does that answer this question?
Yeah, so this is fundamentally important because it's not just that in the arts that our performance talent, the people that work to support productions, the greatest challenge that our creative community is facing right now is it's our cost of living, but it's also the cost of doing business, the cost of creating. And I will say one of the most important experiences I had was early on in my opportunity to participate in civic life. I got to be on the board of the Belcourt Theater. And one of the most important things we did during that time was secure the future of one of Nashville's oldest arts institutions by buying the building. And that took it took a lot of effort on the board and incredible staff. And now its future is secure in Hillsborough Village. And this is a huge deal because, again, looking at the tradition of W.O. Smith, moving around the corner from Edge Hill to its new perch at its new home, trying to do that now with the price of land in the urban core would be nearly impossible. I think similarly, trying to buy the Belcourt now in its current location would be nearly impossible. Well, I was astonished to learn this. I saw a great presentation. This is one of the mind-blowing things for two reasons. One, it was a great presentation by folks at the state of Tennessee, and you would not think that they were going to do something really useful, but it was about their inventory of not just land, but public facilities. And they did a great job. And I turned around and asked our public property department in Metro, hey, do we know what our land is? Do we know what our built environment is for Metro? Crickets. Well, I've joined a few other council members, and we are now nearing the closing stages of understanding that, and that is so important because we can use that land to provide home for arts institutions and to create the performance spaces we know we all need, the places where our artists are going to thrive, and offer it at, frankly, below market rent because that is what we're going to need to do to sustain ourselves. Now, there's some good news, too, of work we've already done on the process of creating cultural districts. I've spent both terms that I've served on the Metro Council representing a good chunk of Music Row, ensuring that we have a Music Row vision plan that uses existing tools to make sure that there are incentives for anybody doing development in that area to honor the idea of music-based businesses. And ultimately, when we bring new businesses to Nashville, especially if they have a footprint on Music Row, we want to make sure that that's where they're trying to anchor themselves so that we have this core of our Music City identity still in Music Row. Now, I'll close by saying one of my favorite experiences as a young person was getting to perform in an independent theater production of Hamlet with my brother. We were the Gravediggers. But it was so important for us in that production to have access to space and be it portable.
Thank you.
I know I'm going to go out of order, but as one of Freddie's constituents on Music Row, I want to tell you that you did a brilliant job helping us at Quaver make sure that music stayed on Music Row and not just condominiums, and I really, really appreciate it.
So, Jeff, I mean, no,
Turn.
we're not going to do it. Look. And why did I think that was coming? I was prepared for that.
Since we're going to let people go out of turn, I was courteous and asked.
You were courteous. Points taken. You were courteous and did ask. But, well, I'm going to say this. Jeff, you were kind of leaning in. I thought this next question, I want to kind of relax and lean into it a little bit, but you stepped back. So I'm going to come back and sit back here and keep us on track a little bit. All right, so I am going to, let's see, where do I want to go here? Jim, Sharon, and Jeff. This will be, so Sharon, you'll get a chance to talk. Let me frame this up and see where we go. This city's arts budget has not kept up with the growth of the arts and arts organizations in Nashville, despite the growth of the city. Would you support funding Metro Arts at 1% of the combined Metro and MNPS budget? That's roughly $30 million of support annually. Jim, refer to Austin and peer cities. How does Nashville compare? So you can start off with any of that.
Well, as I said up front, we're low. But, you know, the interesting thing about tonight's discussion is we are really talking about two different things. One is an arts community that is hanging on by its fingernails, underfunded, struggling with the cost of living in this city. And yet, we have this robust tourist and hospitality industry. How can that be? You know, you think about the fact of what makes this city so special. You know, you could drop me in the middle of Bridgestone, or you could drop me in the middle of any other similar facility around the country, and I wouldn't, you could tell me I was in Bridgestone, but I could be someplace else or vice versa. There's nothing all that unique about that. And yet, again, is a city where our priorities, because we're just going to spend a boatload of money building a new stadium that's going to be used 8 times a year, but the justification for it is how many times a year it's going to be used for other events, including concerts. But is that truly what makes Nashville special from an artistic standpoint? So again, I think we have to think not just about how do we keep people, how do we kind of keep what we've got, but how do we as a city have a strategic plan for growing an arts community that we as residents are going to want to be a part of. And it's not just music. It is a broad range of arts. It's not just a new facility for TPAC. It's how do we preserve the idiosyncratic, unique venues that we have. As you're mentioning, there are other cities that have done a much better job at this than we have. And that's what we should aspire to. So if I'm Austin, I've set up a cultural trust, the purpose of which is to help preserve those iconic, unique venues that artists play at. If I'm Charlotte, I've made strategic investments in major performing arts facilities. What do we want to be? Let's have a vision, not just of hanging on by our fingernails, but let's create an amazing arts community. Again, it will not only enrich us, it will enrich us. So let's not just talk about how do we hang on. Let's talk about how we build.
Sharon, how do we move from the 0.1% to 1%? Where can the fat be trimmed in these budgets?
Again, it's about priority. It's about the leadership. I mentioned earlier, now I'm trying to make sure I remember everything I need to say because it took me 23 minutes to get back to my point. But the first time that I went to council was for the Arts Commission, but I remember going to the council meeting and the symphony and the National Museum for African American Music came under budget at the same time. The symphony was built, flooded, and rebuilt before the ground was broken for this museum. There has to be equitable distribution. We talk about downtown. Now, let me give you my analogy. I love music, I love dancing, I love singing, I love acting, all of those things that are part of the arts and reciting poetry and all of those things, because I'm a woman, phenomenal woman. That's me. However, let me tell you one thing. I love sports. I love sports, and everybody knows Michael Jordan. Everybody knows that Michael Jordan is going to get his 50, 60 points no matter what, right? You know, come on, y'all know y'all got some joy. You know. Nonetheless, Michael Jordan, you know he's the GOAT, okay? Going to get his 50, 60 points. But no matter what, he did not win a championship until he got Scottie Pippen in the game. Scottie Pippen is North Nashville, y'all. He got Tony Kukoc, that's South Nashville. Dennis Rodman, East Nashville. Steve Kerr is West Nashville because he's going to lay there and drop the threes all day long. And then you get 6 championships by doing so. So you got to get everybody in the game if we're going to be that type of city. We've got Plaza Mariachi out there in Southeast Nashville. We got to bring it out there. It has to be equitable. I am chair of Public Arts Committee on the council, and I've also been chair of Conventions and Tourism. It is the arts that is building that economic engine for the state of Tennessee as well as Nashville. What we got to do is make sure that this growth and this development reaches every part of this city and not just a select few. And as mayor, we will most definitely make arts our priority.
All right. So, Jeff, speaking of growth, you answered that we need to take action that links the growth of our arts investments with the growth of the city and its economy. How do we do that?
I think you got to make it a priority. We have to decide whether being Music City, whether that's just a brand, it's just a label that we stick on things, or whether it's truly our identity. And if it's going to be our identity as a city, and it should be, because we know that as the arts flourish, as creativity grows, it's not just there's more music to listen to and more great art to see. We also see that spill over into new businesses starting. We see prosperity across the community. We know that that's times when we see progress, both civic progress and frankly moral progress in our community. It's what makes us who we are. And we got to make sure that we actually have a strategy and a plan to do it. Now, I think that part of that is just making it a priority. And it means bringing resources out from all parts of the table. I mean, you can't just think about what's coming out of the general fund. We have a lot of resources that go into our, tourism budget every year. We know that a lot of those resources go into promoting big projects like NFL draft. But we need to, and we do and can and have used those for the Picasso exhibit, for the Jefferson Street Festival. And we need to expand that work there, but you need to do it across the board too. We should make sure that we're including that in our education budget. When we're thinking about what we're gonna do, whatever's gonna happen on the East Bank, how are you incorporating public art and performance spaces into everything that you're doing there so that we're always creating opportunities and always creating momentum. But I think the other critical thing you got to do is you got to remember We're not just Nashville, we got a whole county here. It's 500 square miles and 700,000 people and 160 schools, and we need the arts to thrive in every one of those neighborhoods in our community. And I think that that's going to take, look, there's not a single little investment that you can make, but I think it is the year-by-year management of the budget so that you're constantly keeping that number ticking up so that the growth of the investment that Nashville's making each year is moving up to 1%, and we're trying to keep it there. And it's hard because we know that there's trade-offs that we don't want to make, but art is who we are. The other thing we should do is explore our relationship with the state to draw down more dollars, and we probably, in the long run, need to look at the dedicated revenue opportunities that some of the cities that have really blown past us, that's what they've done, like Denver, Austin, Charlotte. That's what we got to do to make this happen.
Thank you. So Heidi and Letitia, we're going to continue with this discussion on resources. The Arts and Business Council launched an Artist Release Fund in 2020 to compensate for the cancellation of scheduled gigs and opportunities. It experienced such a high demand from applicants that it could not fund everyone. Would you support the creation and the funding of ongoing emergency relief fund for Nashville's creative workforce, similarly to Austin Music Disaster Fund that had a grant that was $2.3 million? And if so, at what level would you fund it?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I actually worked with Dave Pomeroy and the Musicians Union to make sure that that money was getting to artists and the quarantined musicians because there were a lot of people who were in such big trouble that they were about to not be able to pay their rent and get evicted. And I would absolutely support that. And I think that, you know, Austin's model is a really good one where you have $1,000 in relief to get people by. I think that's something that could make a huge difference in people's lives. And I wanted to kind of go back to, in terms of generating income in general, Councilwoman Hurt's sports analogy was fabulous. I'm notoriously bad at sports analogies, so I appreciated it. You know, we're going to have bold decisions, and we're also going to have to stay the course. There are so many things impacting Nashville right now that this is not going to work going forward unless we make some really, really big decisions. And I like to think about the mayor's office in terms of being a venture catalyst, not a venture capitalist, but a venture catalyst. Because there is an amazing networking opportunity with that office that we need to employ and take advantage of. And this is something that, you know, I did and understand from the music business, because all of the opportunities for film, for television, for music, for expanding our theater community, all of those things can be catalyzed through the mayor's office and generate opportunities that also benefit the people who live here and the people that work here. And for a long time, as we've discussed, we've been focused more on, are we building a place to visit or a place to live? We've been focused more on building a place to visit, I think, over the past couple of decades. We need to really, really focus on Nashvillians in the future. And that's not to be against growth. I think growth is important. But we need to focus on the people who live here, and the musicians and the artists are such a big part of that. You know, I do think it's very important that we offer relief to people, but I also think it's important that we generate opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you.
What I would like to do as mayor, just like the PPP loan, the money ran out, people couldn't get the money to support their businesses, their families, to keep their businesses afloat. I'd like to do something a little bit different. I'd like to retro. So if you're a musician and you lost everything you had because of the shutdown, it was no fault of anybody, it's just what we had to do with the pandemic. I would like to work with the state to get money. If they can prove that this is where their gig was, this is their lifestyle, this is what they did, they should be able to have the funds retroed back to them. Not, oh, I'm sorry, things didn't work out for you, let's move on. Find an Uber, find, you know, a hotel or something to go work. but they should be retroed the funds back that they lost. That's the first thing I want to do as mayor. The second thing, we have not talked enough about our high schools. I ran up on a plaque of Overton High School, 1984, and I saw the size of the band of Overton High School at that time. It was amazing. I'm from Gilmer High School, Gilmer, Texas, and 3 things we do: faith, family, and football. Somebody said something about sports. But I was in the band, and band was very therapeutic for me. I played the flute. I sung sometimes. I pretended to be Whitney Houston, but I didn't make it. But here's the thing. We need to invest more in our teachers, especially those that are special education. I've said this on my platform. Teachers, $70,000 a year to start. Do you know how much time band takes? Do you know how much overtime that band teachers work and they get nothing for it? So back to the original question, I want to make sure as our first thing in our administration that we work with the state legislature to get those individuals their money, their due process back to what they lost. Do you know how many musicians are on the streets, have lived, or renting a bed, renting a couch? We gotta stop making our mouths fried chicken and start putting our mouths to work for our musicians that make our city what it is. Start with working with Davidson County Public Schools, making sure that the arts are fully funded, and then taking care of those that are already doing and making our mental health what it is with our music, TPAC. Finally, before I leave the question, the artists that have put so much time and energy into what they do, we ought to respect them on the parking. Can we get them parking passes instead of them having to run upstairs to get their gig set up, to come down, to have to go to court and pay almost $300 in court and fine fees? Thank you to the judges that dismiss most of these parking fees because they're absolutely insane and ridiculous. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
All right. Alice, Matt, and Fran. You teed it up nicely. I'm going to lean back into the Metro Public Schools. Do you commit to working toward the establishment of fully funded music, visual art, and/or theater arts programs in every Metro Public School? If so, what strategies would you employ?
I'm happy to start, and I'll start with an easy yes. The short answer is we can't be Music City if we aren't a music education city. It starts by providing world-class music education. If any city in the country can do it, it is Nashville. And we ought to do that for a whole variety of reasons that you all in this room know. One, it's a great way to get kids engaged in schools. Chrissy and I have 6 kids, as I mentioned, and each one of them has been engaged by something different. Makeup, fashion, music, art. There is something different to engage each child, and it is absolutely vital. We have the talented musicians here. If we don't have world-class music education, it's simply because we lack the political will to do it. Mm-hmm. There is no other reason. There are great resources that already exist, like Music Makes Us, and let me commend the efforts of the community, the music business community, to invest in music in our schools. But those need to be expanded. We should have world-renowned music education because when we're then known for that, it creates its own excitement and momentum. Music is a key part of making sure that every child has world-class education. And there are other opportunities. The Boys and Girls Club have created recording studios that are adjacent to some of the schools in Nashville. So we need to seek out these kinds of specific opportunities to work with nonprofits to create music opportunities for kids in our schools because it engages the kids in the schools. It invites the industry into our schools. And a lot of people, when I go around and say, hey, what do you think of Metro Nashville Public Schools? They'll say, oh, no, I could never send my kids there. I could only go to private school. But then when you ask them, when was the last time that you actually went into a Metro Nashville Public School? They'll say, oh, well, my cousin's husband was a science teacher in Bellevue Middle 20 years ago. They aren't actually stepping foot into the schools. And when they do, they will see that we have amazing schools, the best teachers. We need more opportunities for more kids to get more engaged in the schools. And when we do that through music education, we have an opportunity to make something that Nashville is known for, not just performance artists or the music business, but that people will want to send their kids to Metro Nashville Public Schools because we have the best music education in the country. I commit to do that as mayor.
Okay.
And I also commit to ever sing because I'm terrible at it.
Okay. Good thing that's not a requirement. Yes. Alice, what do you say?
So I want to first say 22 years ago, I taught high school in Los Angeles public schools because well-intentioned public policy that said, let's make our class sizes 20 to 1, didn't actually think through if we had enough teachers to make that happen. So I am, by my background and career, fully committed to music education, but I want to first bring up what I think is a critical issue to actually not just saying you're going to do it, but being able to affect it in every school. So working as I have, because states, we know, are the laboratory of democracy. If one state, like Texas, has great music education funding, we can then benchmark ourselves against that. So I've actually spent quite a bit of time going to different states and working on how do we talk about our music education teachers in state law, starting to talk about them not as discretionary or extra teachers, but as essential teachers, right? Making the time in the school day between the bells. I spent a tremendous amount of time with Miami-Dade's superintendent, Alberto Carvalho, making the case they didn't have kindergarten, first and second grade, and you might say, why does that matter to Nashville? Because when a large school system quits teaching music education, others follow. And this sort of sense of it is not as important because, so it has to start with saying you can commit to it, but then you actually have to figure out, do we have the educators to do it? One of the biggest challenges for our individuals who have a college degree and are dedicated and want to teach in our schools, and maybe their background was in music performance and not in music education, is that it is getting them a certificate so that they can be recognized as the teacher of record. We are doing that today in about 35 school districts across the state through a program called iTeach that I brought in to different districts. So it's taking those sort of ideas and saying, not only do we have the desire, because we know kids want to take music, but do we also have the time in the school day? And so K through 5, I think we can absolutely commit to that. I think our bigger challenge is 6 through 12. When we look at what some of the requirements are for students to graduate, can we actually, from a scheduling perspective, pull that off so that music and art is not considered something that is an after-school activity, which is important, but that it is between the bells. Because when it's between the bells, it's as important as science, it's as important as math, and it's as important as history. So I actually say, yes, I commit to it, but also I want to say we've got to figure out what some of those bottlenecks or what some of those stucks are, especially around the certification of our teachers, so that terrific artists in our town that are capable of being great music teachers, that we get out of their way and let them come into our classrooms.
Okay. All right, Fran.
Can you hear me? Okay. So one of the things that we do know is that we do not have adequate music in all of our schools. Arts, music teacher, that kind of thing. We know we don't have all of that. One of the things that, I love, like, are our nonprofit organizations. What I love and like about this room is that there's so many talented artists in here. What I would like to see, even though we cannot, and if I'm your next mayor, we will, because I'm very intentional about getting that type of work done. But for right now, until we can fully fund music and arts in our schools, in our next school budget, it would be great to have volunteers to come into our schools that are talented, that are enriched in arts and entertainment, because that's how we get our students engaged, because the talent is in this room, and of those who are watching, the talent is there. It is important and imperative that we really pay close attention to what's happening in our schools. Arts, entertainment, music, all of that means so much to our students. The problem is that we need more people to help in this city. We need more people, Nashvillians, that want to invest in public schools. That's what we need. We need more of that. If we get more of that, because we are all super talented in this room and we all can offer something, then it's a win-win. But right now, what we're kind of seeing a hands-off approach with our public schools, and we have to be more hands-on. If we don't do that, we'll start losing more of our students. You heard me say that crime in the city is happening between the ages of 14 and 26 years old. How can we deter that? We can do that by investing more into our schools, not just with our budget, but people who are really hands-on and really can make a difference for our students. And that's exactly what we need. I walk the walk and I talk the talk. When we had a nonprofit who needed space for their music class, I offered my daycare. I have 3 daycares, child care facilities in Antioch. I offered my space, and that's what we can start doing. We can offer space, we can offer time and energy into this, and we will see a difference. But we just have to be more intentional as Nashvillians, as parents, as teachers, as educators, and that's how we do this. But we have to start somewhere, and it needs to be now. Thank you.
I'm glad you said walk the walk and hands-on, because I was about to ask you next, what does that even mean? Like, what if you, as a former school board member, you just gave us an example of one thing that you did with your own resources and power and space. And give us another example, some initiative that you supported while you were on the board.
Yeah, so one of the other very intentional initiatives that became very political, and you all probably have seen me pretty much in this city, one of the most decorated board members in this city, advocating for our public schools, not just for my district, but over 80,000 students. The most pressing time in their lives, the pandemic, right? We kept our students out of the classroom for an entire year, and that was so harmful for our students. I was the only board member that stepped up. And again, you have to be more intentional. Now, I call myself, and this is not the PPP, but I call myself the PEP. I had to have a plan, I executed, and progress was made. So I didn't sit back and watch these students suffer any longer. I stepped up, I walked that walk, and I talked that talk on behalf of 80,000 students, their parents, and that's exactly the type of leadership you want in the city. Yeah, was it hard? Was it political? Yeah, it was. But it takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of passion to do this type of work. And my walk and talk my talk is what I did, and everyone watched it. And I'm really proud of that, because we had children that were suffering, and now they're back in school. Thank you.
Right. Alice, you mentioned Between the Bells, and that immediately sounded like a book title to me. So I don't know if you're an author. You can have that, girl, for free tonight. I'm giving you that. I do know, though, that you authored and wrote an op-ed, and seemingly it came across that you are very passionate about the need for arts in our schools. I believe you when you say you are. How do you ensure, and if you don't feel like you want to answer it in such a strong word, like ensure, what one initiative would you say is something that you can see that could be actually activated and initiated to provide schools, music in all of our schools?
Well, I think the op-ed that you're referring to is a couple of years ago, and I do think it's important to read about what people wrote before they were asking you to support them, right? And so that op-ed was actually about reflecting on Alignment Nashville, which is a group here that hosts an annual summer conference about the mental health and well-being of our kids. And one of the parents from Newtown spoke, and we think very frequently today about the hardening of our schools, and we cannot unilaterally disarm. I think it'd be a wonderful world if we can, but we can't. So our schools have to be hardened in order to think about external threats. But what I think music does, and what that op-ed reflects on, is making sure that we are creating in schools a place that children want to come, so that they can not only want to learn how to connect with their own emotions, but with other classmates. Because what this mother said to us, the Choose Love movement, is that the individual who committed the massacre in Newtown was once a child in our schools that we could have potentially acted earlier to help. And I believe and said there that I think music uniquely helps people find a place in the school. It reflects, when we think of a well-run music education classroom, every person in that room finds a way to be a part, right? Someone has the triangle, someone has the vocals, someone else has the Orff instruments, right? A music teacher is helping kids learn how to be part of a community where they don't all have to play the same instrument, but they all can have a place. And so, to me, I think when we think about the heart of our schools and about music, it's saying this is who we are as a community, but it's also helping kids learn how to understand and connect with their own emotions and elevating it to an issue as important as mental health, right? To an issue as important as school safety. And saying we're not an after the fact and after school, we are integral to the identity of a school. And then I guess lastly, I will say I think that arts uniquely bring parents, and I know from Fran Bush's work on the school board and so brilliantly advocating for what I believe that most families wanted, which was the reopening of our schools. Think about so many of our communities, school buildings can look like a government building. That can be scary for some of our families. But when we say our children are playing even a really bad recorder with the third grade, we come into the school. And when we get our families back into school, we get them more engaged and we help improve the school too. So I just think claiming that place of arts as building the community, building the structure, and making schools matter for a lot of people.
And you just let me down. I am so disappointed in myself. I should have brought recorders for us all tonight to play it. I could have done that. We'll do that next time. I know. All right, Matt. So it's only fair that you answer the same question. What initiatives are you bringing to our schools? What do you think is important?
Sure, I'll be quick. I mean, music makes us. There are great programs already that exist, and I would want to talk to the industry to hear other ideas and initiatives. I mentioned earlier that we should have an open table and listen to folks who have ideas. I don't know that we need to create entirely new government programs for these, but I think supporting opportunities that already exist for industry to invest in schools is a great idea. And so I would support Music Makes It and other initiatives to invest in public schools, but we don't need to go create new programs necessarily.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So we are at the point where we have our last question for the night. You will have 2 minutes, and we will start with you, Jeff, and we'll do like we did before, but we'll go this way, so just one after the other. So the question is, what other strategies are you exploring to support the creative economy in Nashville?
Wow. So first, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight for this important discussion. I think you can already tell that we're proving the thesis of this event because I think everyone will leave here thinking in bigger ways about the city because we've been thinking about arts in the city. I think fundamentally this is about committing resources and committing resources that are going to grow as the city grows. But if that's all we do, we're not going to actually make the difference that we need. The most powerful weapon in the mayor's arsenal is actually the conference room table, where you have the power to convene forces and sectors and nonprofits and partners from across the community. And I think that that's where we need to see the most active leadership when it comes to this area. We need to bring the philanthropic community to the table so that we really start thinking about, when are we building our next art museum? When are we finding permanent homes for what's next, this next stage, the long-term vision for our city? We need to bring those partnerships from the music business to think through, how are we actually putting the resources into Music Makes Us in our schools? How are we building the sort of development districts across the community that I talked about earlier, that partner up both affordable housing, performance space, and hopefully even the connections to the actual performance and money-making space? How do we rebuild our partnerships with the state government, which, you know what, we can do. I have worked across the aisle and built coalitions to get more work done on vocational education. There are lots of vocations that actually connect to the arts that are about how do we get technology working, how do we get performance spaces work, and that's the kind of work that we'll do when I'm mayor of the city.
So when you think about what makes Nashville, Nashville, what makes Nashville different from other places? There are interesting cities that have beaches or mountains. In Nashville, artists are our beaches. Artists are our beaches. But our beaches are being eroded. And when you look at cities around the country that are threatened with the things that make them who they are investing intentionally to address that erosion. Literal cities and beaches as water rises. But there is a rising water in Nashville that is threatening our beaches, threatening our artists. And so we need to be intentional. You asked what programs that we're exploring, that I'm interested in exploring. It's about the things that we've already talked about today, making sure that there is affordable and attainable housing for artists so that Nashville continues to be a place that people want to move. It is about making sure that we have the investment in our public school system so that parents want to choose to move here so their kids can get a world-class education in their schools. And it is about showing off the brilliant art that we have here. One thing that I would love to see is Fisk University has incredible art and isn't able to exhibit all of it because of the resources that are constrained. There should be a world-class collecting art museum that is either on Fisk's campus or adjacent to it that becomes a center for the world to see the art that exists here. That's something we should explore and make happen. I will.
Thank you.
So I've been thinking a lot, just like we did when we had to reset in economic development to bring what was the film commission inside of economic development and to say it is an industry and an industry vertical as important as the auto industry, as important as the healthcare industry, as important as small motor manufacturing, which is like really big in Tennessee, just in case you're wondering, distribution, logistics like a FedEx. But bringing, and I think one of the challenges is sometimes as arts advocates, we are not good at, we want everyone to believe that art is important for the sake of art, and we have to learn how to talk about it in a way that other people can see its benefit, right? So like mental health for students, that's a way that people who normally say, I don't really get the music people, how do I start to understand them? But on the business side, I think about it for us is how do we start to match the brand of Music City and the brand of Tennessee being an entertainment destination with the way that we treat our performing artists, right? So starting to try to think where can that fit or how can you fit that so that part of our brand is not only is Tennessee a great place to come to see a show or to go to the Grand Ole Opry, but that we have musicians who are taken care of. So I actually think it's starting to say within, and I actually don't believe it is just a city issue because so many of our touring artists and our artists, they don't actually live in Davidson County. So the idea of giving them some type of a tax rebate when they don't live in Davidson County, we can't actually do that, right? So I think about how do we start to leverage, as we did with moving the Entertainment Commission as an industry, and starting to think about that from the level of the state tourism, and how do we start to match our brand as saying, this is not only the best place to watch a show, but it's the best place to perform a show.
So we're all running for mayor, and you're going to be asked to distinguish among the candidates. And what you heard tonight is we all like art, we all like the arts, we all like performance, we all like Music City. It is the soul. But we've had a huge opportunity to distinguish ourselves over the past few weeks through the biggest deal in the city's history. And I say this as somebody who learned how to play piano at W. Smith. You know why I learned to play piano at W. Smith? We couldn't afford other lessons. And W. Smith is an income-based program. And my brother was not able to learn how to play piano at W. Smith because we had gotten just a little bit closer to middle class. And we couldn't afford, we were income disqualified from W. Smith, but still couldn't afford private music lessons. Now, this is an equity conversation fundamentally, the arts is. And we just took a gigantic step away from equity in the city's biggest deal in history, which was a Titan Stadium deal. That is, I'm the only person up here who voted no, and the reason I voted no is because that deal commits us to $4 billion. So when you hear people commit to the arts and other things that are easy to say yes to, remember that. Remember what the expression of priorities was. Because that was not a $4 billion investment in ourselves. That was a $4 billion investment in a venue that's going to be home to 10 to 11 home games per year. And there will be other people who perform there, but the artists we need to support are the ones who live here. The artists we need to support are the people who are moving here to make it. The artists we need to support are the ones who are teaching our children. And my daughter doesn't have an art teacher. And every student in this district deserves an art teacher. That's what I'm going to be fighting for.
I'm so glad that they can tell you all what they are going to do, but I'm telling you what I've already done. And that will continue. I did vote for it. I voted for the stadium, and I also got a concession for 25% to go to minority and women-owned businesses, and my colleague up here voted in favor of that as well. That is going to bring a $20 billion revenue to this city. So I think that there's misinformation in regards to that, but it's going to also eliminate some debt that we already have. But this is about arts and about what we're going to do. And what I'm going to do is what I did when I had no money over there at Jump, and I created LEAP, and we took kids out and made sure that those houses and apartments that MDHA built, that all of those panels had murals on them that were painted by those kids in my LEAP program. That was those kids from Cheatham Place and gave them something to do in those after-school programs that they did not have. Those kids were the ones that I took over to Sony and to that world-renowned art gallery at Fisk University that we know as Van Vechten Art Gallery with the world-renowned director and curator Jamal Sheets. So I'm telling you that it is already out there and we are already doing it. So if I had some money as mayor, just think about what we really could do. We can win us some championships. 6 of them.
Well, I'm going to find myself agreeing with Freddie here because we are growing as a city without a plan to manage it, and it is causing a whole series of issues that affect everybody in this city. And we are debating tonight, can we please have another $10 or $15 million for our arts community? And as Freddie said, we just committed hundreds, billions of dollars to a single franchise that is owned by a billionaire that will increase the value of that franchise by billions of dollars. Now, I'm glad that I came out against it in July. I'm glad Freddie finally got on board, but he's a smart guy. But I think it tells you a lot about where we are in politics in the city, because in the face of all these needs, that's what our politicians spent their time doing for the past year. And not only were they, as they were negotiating that deal, they were also taking political contributions from those they were negotiating with. We do need to change politics as usual and get our heads on straight about what our priorities are as a city. It's not just the artists that live here, it's everybody that lives here. Now, I would love to see You know, I will often say, God, we have done so many studies as a city. We don't need any more studies. But I do think we do need a strategic plan for what we are going to do in the arts community. What do we want to build? As Matt said, we have one of the top 3 African-American arts collections at Fisk University, and they have no place to put it. We need to figure out what do we want to be, because we can be even more than we are today. Thank you.
So I do think that we are in this moment of greed versus good, which is how I would characterize that. And we have and have-nots, and we certainly have and have-nots in the entertainment industry. And let's just be clear that entertainment is not mutually exclusive to just the act of entertainment. We use entertainment in advertising for those auto companies. We use entertainment in the marketing that we do for practically every business. Entertainment, arts, the creative class participate in every aspect of our society. And so we can't extricate that from, ourselves. It's a part of our lives. As somebody who's had lots of drummers sleeping in my basement, I can tell you that we have to make sure that we're supporting the people who live here. And it goes back to my campaign slogan, which is, are we building a place to visit or a place to live? And I think in the foreseeable future, it's very important that we focus on the people who live here and our neighborhoods, on the kitchen table issues, the affordability issues that are challenging everybody in our community, and make sure that we're supporting the people who live here and the artists who made this town the great town that it is. And that is not just music artists. That is ballet. That is theater. That is the arts and crafts industry. Nancy Saturn and the Crafts Fair, which was a wonderful thing that I always went to growing up and still exists. Art is permeating our community, and it's something that we have to give some love back to now, because I think that we can see very clearly that we haven't been supporting our artists enough in this city.
As an educator, Natisha Brooks 16, hashtag pay to play to park. No, not for our entertainers and not for our artists. That's not what we need for Nashville. $760 million as a bond for the Titan Stadium from the state legislature. How about a $760 million bond for our artists and those that perform, those that need places to stay, housing, places to lay their guitars at night. I want to take 30 seconds to take up for the teachers. I understood what happened during the pandemic, but what the fear was is that teachers would walk out. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Protection through the pandemic, a lot of teachers didn't know what to do, and so they wanted to protect their families, and I stand behind that. Last but not least, what would we do? Committed and collaborative. That's what we would be as your Nashville mayor, have a collaborative discussion with our musicians, our arts community, and be committed as your mayor to putting this in place so that what is, I always say this, all roads leads to mental health. That includes our educators, that starts in our schools, making sure that our band directors, our art teachers have the stipends, that they're not taking out of their own pockets. I want you to realize that. A lot of educators are taking out of their own pockets. I was an educator for 33 years, so I know. So we want to make sure that we understand that commitment to what we say, being collaborative with the state, passing down the dollars. If we have a bond for $760 million for the Titan Stadium, we have a bond for $760 million to our educators and to our artists of the community. Natisha Brooks, 16, thank you for the conversation.
First and foremost, I want to tell everybody thank you for having us. Thank you for allowing us to have this space tonight. You know, a lot of things go through my head when I think about a lot of things, and you mentioned about walking that walk and talking that talk. It is important that you do your research, okay? Yeah, God forbid we ever have another pandemic. I understood that our artists and our entertainers, they were displaced during the pandemic, right? You had to furlough. You had to find work. You had to scrape change just to make it. And I didn't agree with that. because I'm very intentional about making things move, right? Remember, I talk about a plan. You have to have a plan. As your next mayor, God forbid we ever have another pandemic. But one of the things that I will do as your next mayor, I won't shut down a city. I won't shut down our schools. You have to have a plan in place just in case. Because what happened in our city, things were kind of moving like this, up and down, up and down. Wasn't nothing very, it wasn't very clear on our directions. And it's very important to be very intentional about the work that's being done in this city. We got a laundry list of things that we have to deal with: affordable housing, infrastructure, crime and safety, right? Education. But you have to do your homework, because I'm very intentional, and I do walk the walk, and I do talk the talk. I don't give you all these political jargons, because that's just not me. I'm very transparent about the work I've done. The education system and the things I did over here on the education side, the realm that I did, the work I did, the leadership that I worked out for our students, I want to take that same leadership and put it into our city, because I will always have a plan. When you go and you vote August 3rd, think of Fran Bush, because she's going to have that PEP factor, and that is have a plan, execute, and progress will be made. Thank you again for tonight, and you God bless you.
All right. Well, thank you all. This concludes our evening. Thank you to our presenting sponsors. I would like to thank this panel of amazing candidates for this dynamic and insightful conversation. Thank you, Sharon, for keeping it nice. Thank you. Well, no, you're not off the hook yet. I want the same yes and enthusiasm when I call you next week for recorder practice. All right, there we go. Good night, y'all. Safe travels home, and I'm tossing it to Lydia.
Hey, Gina, I'm right behind you, too. Sorry, my mic just came on. All right, tossing it over to me. You, as the audience, have been quiet and listening the last 2 hours, so make some noise now if you'll learn something new, right? Yeah, there's your opportunity. So we want to say one last thank you to the National Museum of African American Music, you, the audience, those watching online, of course, our moderators, candidates, and sponsors. We want to name those one more time. That is the Arts and Business Council of Greater Nashville, the Hutton Hotel, Mojo Marketing, Martin Development, Urban Housing Solutions, Urban League, Young Professionals of Middle Tennessee, the Change Agency, the Band Group, plus our social media partners, Love Noise, and MBK Nashville. One more round of applause for them. Okay, here's your reminder. It might be the first time you hear it, but it's certainly not going to be the last this season. Remember to vote in the mayoral election. Early voting starts on July 14th. Election day is August 3rd, if you can believe it. That's going to be here very quickly. And you're going to want to check abcnashville.org/mayoral forum for the complete candidate questionnaire that we sent each of these candidates, as well as audience polling results, which are going to be available tomorrow. That being said, there are waters, no more wine, but there are waters in the lobby, and you guys are free to hang out until 9 o'clock is when we need to be out of here. And thank you for the privilege of your time tonight. Have a good one.